Hi guys, this is Squishy Bee. I'm here today to do a video about my Christian testimony and go over some dreams that I had that I believe were pointing us to the last days. I'm going to try to break this up into a couple of different sections because I did the entire thing and it was too long and it wouldn't save properly. So I'm going to start with a time period back in 2009 that started all of this. And hopefully you'll be able to see from what I'm saying that this isn't just ordinary dreams. Okay, so the first thing that happened was not necessarily a dream, but I believe it was related. There was a weird incident that happened when I was downstairs doing laundry in my basement, and all of a sudden I hear this screaming noise going, "Beware, beware, the end is near, the end is near." And then this creepy laugh. And I flipped out and ran up the stairs and I told my family, there's this creepy noise going on downstairs. I have no idea what it's coming from. You have to come and investigate with me. So we all just kind of tiptoed down the stairs and this noise is still going off repeatedly. And we tracked the noise way back into a storage area. And way down at the bottom of all these storage bins, at the very bottom was this one bin, and clearly the sound was coming from this bin. So we cautiously opened it up, and here's this creepy animated crow. His eyes were lit up, and his beak was moving, and he's just yelling, "Caw, caw, the end is near, beware, beware!
Beware! The end is near! Beware! The end is near!
So after this weird crow incident, I began to have this weird series of very realistic dreams. The first one, I dreamt about my brother's dog dying. And first off, I don't have a relationship with my brother. That's another whole video. I know he has a dog and what it looks like, but other than that, I don't know anything about his life currently. So I told my family about this dream, and we were all kind of sad at the idea. And no sooner did I get that out of my mouth, and my mom called and said my brother's dog died overnight, the same night I had this nightmare. And we all just kind of looked at each other like, well, that's weird. And so after that began this weird, realistic, reoccurring nightmare about this girl that I didn't know, this really pretty blonde girl that was murdered, and they cut off all of her fingers and removed all of her teeth. And I began to start having like this weird like PTSD reaction to this nightmare. Like I was having flashbacks of this girl having her fingers cut off, and it was just a nightmare. It wasn't even anything that had ever happened that I saw, but my mind was treating it like it was something that actually happened. It was the strangest experience. I would literally be in a store and see someone who reminded me of this girl, and I would stop in my tracks and just cringe and have this like PTSD flashback of her fingers being cut off, and my family would just look at me like, "You're thinking about this nightmare again, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yes, I don't know what's going on." And so this went on for a while, and then one day we were watching the news, and here's the picture of this same exact girl that I had been dreaming for months. And I was like, that's her, that's the girl. So we turn up the sound on the TV and we're listening, and it said that this girl, this Jasmine Fiore, I think her last name was, I might be pronouncing it wrong, but she had been murdered by, I believe, her husband, and he had cut off all of her fingers and removed all of her teeth and like jammed her in a suitcase, and they found her body dumped somewhere in a dumpster, I believe. And I was like, why is this happening? I have no idea who this person is. Why would I dream this if I can't do anything about it? Like, what was I supposed to do? I had no idea who this was or that it was real. And so I just kind of put that in the back of my mind, like, just one more weird thing. But then after that, the nightmares about her stopped. and the flashbacks stopped. So I was like, well, I guess that's what that was about. And then shortly after that, I had another nightmare. This time I was in a like touristy town, this cute little town of shops, and I was buying like a Diet Coke from this vintage style cooler that had like the old timey bottles of pop that were in like the old vintage glass bottles, and it was like a candy shop sort of thing. And so I just gotten my stuff, I purchased it, and we all of a sudden heard this rumbling sound, and everything was shaking, and we were kind of flipped out and ran to go to the door. And just as we get to the door, all this water just comes rushing in, and water and debris and cars and people and screams. It was just horrible, all rushing down in like this massive flash flood down this road, picking up everything in its path. And then I woke up. And after what had happened with the dog dream and with the Jasmine dream, I was like, is this something that's going to happen? Am I being shown this for some reason? So then we just started watching the news for something like that to happen, and nothing did. But you'll see towards the end of this story that it does happen. It just took some time. So after that, I then had another nightmare, similar with it being very realistic and memorable. And like to this day, as you can see, this is 2018. This was back in 2009 that this was going on, and I still can remember it very vividly, like it just happened. And so this nightmare, I was again in like a touristy type town, but this time it was like a Western style tourist town. And again, it was a whole bunch of little shops, and I was in this shop with, I wasn't myself, I was this other lady with kids, and I had a husband with some boys, and they went across the street into a different shop, and I took the girls and went into a shop on my side of the street, and we were in there shopping, and all of a sudden we hear this rumbling, and stuff starts getting knocked off the shelves, and we're like, oh my gosh, it's an earthquake. And so we ran to the door, and we just get outside, and we see all these cracks opening up in the ground. So I'm like, oh, I guess it is an earthquake, but we didn't really think of this place being a place where there was earthquakes. And then suddenly lava starts coming up out of these cracks. And I was like, what the heck is this? There was no volcano anywhere nearby, so we were really confused as to why all of a sudden lava would just be coming up out of the ground, out of these cracks. And then ash starts coming down from the sky. And we're all just so confused as to what the heck this could be. And then I woke up, and I told my family about this, and I was like, have you ever heard of like an earthquake and then lava just coming up out of the ground where there's no visible volcano nearby? And like, no, I have no idea what that would be. So then again, we just kind of put that out of my mind and kept an eye out for the news, but just kind of stored that away in the that was weird category. And then I started having again a repetitive nightmare over and over again. This time it was about tornadoes, but not just normal tornadoes. This was like multiple tornadoes on the ground at once, 3, 4, 5 tornadoes at once. And then other times I would have a nightmare that I was having a tornado in areas where there aren't normally tornadoes, like New York where I live. We don't normally have tornadoes, but for some reason there was this increase in tornadoes in our area. Like we would be just driving and all of a sudden turn the corner, there's a tornado. And so I started having like this abnormal fear of tornadoes. Like, you know, anytime there was a storm, I'd be looking outside like, is this going to turn into a tornado? And it was really not reasonable because we don't have those here. So, I mean, we didn't back then anyways. As you'll see later, we do now. So anyways, after that, I then had this really vivid nightmare that I was this construction guy, and I was working on this little building on a beach, and I suddenly noticed water coming underneath the door, the crack of the door. And before I could get down off my ladder to see what was going on, the door just burst open and water just comes flooding in. And I panicked and I was like trying to get out, but the water was pushing me back, and I just could not get out the door. So I worked my way over to this window, and I crawled out this window and somehow managed to get up on the roof. And then my other construction buddies came and kind of rescued me out of there. And then we got to safety, and they're like, dude, what were you doing here? Did you not see that this hurricane was coming? I don't understand why you'd even be out here with the storm surge coming in. And I was like, I didn't know it was coming already, and I didn't know it was going to be this bad. And they're like, well, anyways, dude, we found the most craziest thing that got washed up by this storm. This really old ancient boat washed up on the beach, and we found it. And then we looked through the boat, and we found this really weird old relic, and we're going to keep it because we're sure it's worth a fortune, and we're just not going to tell anybody. And then I woke up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how weird is this? I just had the craziest nightmare about these conspiring construction guys that, found this really old boat that got washed up by this huge hurricane that kind of, caught this guy off guard. And so after the other ones, I was like, is this something that's going to happen? I kind of kept an eye out for this, but nothing like that happened back then. So then I had one last nightmare in that time frame of the 2009 time frame. And this time I was standing in New York City, and the city had been completely destroyed. The way that I would describe it is, if you have seen any of the pictures of Syria after months of bombing, and you just see shells of what used to be buildings, and there's like this concrete powder everywhere from where the bombs had just exploded, and it shoots the concrete up in the air, and then it coats everything with this like powder. That's what it looked like. And there were all the windows were smashed out and big holes in the buildings, and there was like nobody around, no movement anywhere. The only thing I could see was this garbage can that had a fire in it in the distance, and that was it. And as I'm standing there just in shock of all of the destruction, this really weird old-timey train pulls up next to me. And as it pulls up, it opens the door, and there's nobody in it, but I was just kind of like drawn to get on this train and leave. And so I get on this train, and the door shuts, and it just whisks off, and then I wake up. And, this is the time when I'm going to mention this really strange reoccurring nightmare I had as a child, because I believe that it's kind of connected.